Wind sweeps across the scorched plains of ancient Mesopotamia, carrying the scent of dust and forgotten time. Beneath the cracked earth, a hand chisels through sand and stone, uncovering fragments of a sealed parchment wrapped in copper sheets. The writing, faint yet unbroken, speaks of fire that devours the sky and towers that reach higher than the clouds, visions impossible for its age. Centuries pass before the words are read again, their meaning now eerily familiar. The parchment foretold the thunder of machines, the fall of towers, and the trembling of the earth under human creation. As the last grain of dust falls from the relic, silence grips the chamber. What voice whispered such visions through time, and why did it wait for us to listen? The news spread swiftly, a prophecy unearthed that speaks with unsettling precision of our own age. Scholars dismiss it as coincidence, yet unease grips those who read it. The words describe towers breaking the heavens, fire raining from the sky, and people watching the end through glass. The lines blur between poetry and foresight, and those who study it begin to sense a pattern, one that stretches across civilizations separated by oceans and millennia. As translations progress, similar prophecies begin to surface. A Mayan carving showing firebirds in the sky, a Chinese oracle foretelling steel mountains that move on wheels, an Egyptian hymn lamenting the fall of towers made not by gods, but men. Different tongues, different lands, yet the same voice whispering through centuries. The discovery no longer feels accidental. It feels orchestrated. The deeper they search, the more the past seems to respond. Earthquakes reveal buried chambers. Old manuscripts resurface in monasteries untouched for centuries. It is as if the world itself is offering up its secrets, piece by piece, warning humanity of something approaching, a cycle that history forgot to end. As night descends, the artifact is sealed again, this time in glass, not copper. The researchers step back, unaware that the faint vibrations in the earth beneath their feet mirror those described in the final line of the prophecy. When the voice of the buried speaks again, the earth shall answer. Prophecy has begun to echo, not in myth, but in motion, long before Rome rose from its 7 hills. Before empires dreamed of eternity, another civilization left warnings, carved in the bones of mountains. Deep within Anatolia, an inscription older than iron spoke of a kingdom that would rise upon blood and crumble beneath its own pride. Centuries later, historians uncovered that every symbol matched the story of empires yet unborn. Babylon, Rome, even the nations of our modern age. The prophecy spoke not of one ruler, but of a pattern. Power ascending in light, falling in fire, and leaving only silence behind. The words were not meant for kings. They were meant for us. Among the carvings, one figure dominates, a crowned man holding fire in one hand and an hourglass in the other. Beneath him, armies march, cities burn, and rivers turn red. Scholars once called it mythic symbolism. Yet as centuries passed, the same image reappeared in empires half a world apart, each believing it foretold their glory. None saw the warning. Every kingdom that bore the symbol soon collapsed under its own shadow. From Babylon's ziggurats to Rome's marble halls, power followed the same rhythm of rise and ruin. The prophecy, rediscovered in fragments across centuries, described this pattern not as divine punishment, but as law. It said that every empire would reach a moment when its towers cast no shadow, when its people forgot the cost of their own ambition. That moment, it warned, was always the beginning of the end. In Rome, a similar verse was carved into marble beneath the Forum, centuries after the Anatolian script. The city of eternal stone will burn, rebuilt in its own image. Historians once called it poetic arrogance, yet records show it was engraved days before a fire consumed half the city. Those who survived claimed they heard voices whispering through the flames, a language that sounded older than Latin. The prophecy of the fallen empires did not end with Rome. Its final verse spoke of a kingdom without borders, a realm connected by unseen threads, where voices and visions travel through air. When the verse was written, the concept was unimaginable. Yet today, we live inside its promise, and perhaps its warning. The prophecy was not about kings or cities. It was about us, and the cycle we are still repeating. Long before the compass found north or calendars mark years, humanity looked upward for answers. In the silence between constellations, they believed that the gods wrote their fates. From Babylon's towers to the temples of the Maya, astronomer priests watched the heavens not for beauty, but for warnings. Among their charts, a recurring pattern emerged, an alignment of stars said to mark the fall of rulers and the birth of storms. The same alignment reappeared before every recorded collapse of empire. When the stars shifted again in our own century, some wondered if the sky had begun whispering once more. In Alexandria, scrolls preserved by fire and fate revealed a forgotten equation linking celestial movement to earthly events. The astronomers who studied it believed it could predict droughts, floods, even wars. But when the Roman armies came, the knowledge vanished into smoke. Centuries later, fragments of the same calculations appeared in Arabic manuscripts, proving the old scholars had been closer to understanding the sky than anyone realized. Across the world, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya built their temples in alignment with celestial paths so precise that modern astronomers still marvel at their accuracy. Their calendars foretold the birth of eclipses and the death of kings. When explorers rediscovered these ruins, they dismissed the predictions as superstition, until the same celestial alignments appeared again, signaling events that changed nations. The Maya never claimed to read the stars. They claimed to listen to them. In medieval Europe, astrologers risked their lives to chart forbidden skies. One such seer recorded a vision of 3 comets blazing together, a sign he believed would herald the rise of a great empire and the death of faith. Centuries later, that same alignment appeared on the eve of global war. Historians debated coincidence, but in every record, the same phrase returned: the heavens remember. Today, astronomers speak not of prophecy but of probability. Yet satellites orbiting high above the Earth now record cosmic patterns that echo the same cycles the ancients once feared. Solar storms rise and fall with eerie precision. The stars have not changed, only our language has. Perhaps prophecy was never about prediction but memory, the universe reminding us that every end has already been written somewhere in its light. They appeared without warning and disappeared without trace, voices that spoke truths no one could explain. In forgotten villages, deserts, and temples, they foretold storms, deaths, and deliverance. Some called them holy, others heretic. Yet every prophecy left behind the same silence, the moment when their words came true. Historians later found records of these wanderers across continents, describing the same man or woman centuries apart. The impossible suggestion arose that it was not many prophets but one message, reborn through countless voices. In the deserts of Judea, one prophet spoke of a flood that would rise from within the earth rather than from the sky. Years later, underground rivers burst through the land, drowning whole settlers. His warnings were recorded by trembling scribes who claimed he vanished into light as the first tremor began. The ancient texts describe him not as a man, but as a messenger of memory, one who carried the knowledge of ages unseen. In the icy north, a woman carved her visions into stones, predicting the fall of a kingdom when fire walks the sky. The carvings were ignored until the night lightning split the fortress walls and flames consumed the halls. The stones still stand, their runes now worn and smooth, as if the earth itself tried to forget what she had said. Her name was erased, but her words lived on, etched into the storms she once described. Far to the east, In a forgotten temple carved into the Himalayan cliffs, monks guarded a single scroll said to contain the last words of a vanished prophet. It spoke of voices made of light that would connect the world, and a great silence that would follow when mankind ceased to listen. The monks believed the prophecy described the end of human thought itself, when wisdom would vanish beneath the noise of its own inventions. When researchers pieced together the words of these vanished prophets, they realized the messages were fragments of a single story, one that stretched across ages and continents. The same warnings, the same promise, spoken by voices that never met. The conclusion was unsettling. Perhaps prophecy was not prediction, but remembrance. The world trying to remind itself of what it once knew, and what it is destined to forget again. History remembers what it is allowed to remember. The rest burns. In the vaults of empires and the catacombs of faith, prophecies too dangerous to speak were hidden beneath centuries of dust. They spoke of kings who would fall, temples that would crumble, and truths that would unmake thrones. Those who guarded them called them words that burn the tongue. Yet, each time the world silenced them, the same visions returned, written anew in a different age, by a hand that seemed to remember what had been lost. In the libraries of Constantinople, scholars uncovered fragments of a banned manuscript that foretold a sea of voices that would speak without sound. The prophecy was deemed heretical, and the emperor ordered its destruction. The city burned soon after. Those who escaped claimed that, as the flames consumed the library, a wind howled through the halls, carrying whispers in a dozen forgotten tongues. Centuries later, in the hidden chambers of the Vatican, rumors spread of a sealed prophecy locked behind iron doors. Those few who claimed to have read it spoke of a time when men would build their own gods, creations of thought and light that would outgrow their makers. The prophecy ended with a single sentence: when mankind teaches the silent to speak, it will no longer understand the sound of its own voice. The scroll was never seen again. In the East, an emperor ordered the destruction of a prophecy that warned of glass towers rising to the heavens. He believed it mocked his palace of mirrors. Years later, his empire fell during a storm that shattered every mirror in his court. The fragments reflected his image 1,000 times, each one cracked differently, as if mocking the man who had tried to silence the future. Every forbidden prophecy shared the same secret. They did not predict destruction, they warned of forgetting. Civilizations did not fall because they were cursed. They fell because they ignored the warnings they once swore to protect. As the last of these hidden texts fades into history, one truth remains: prophecies are not about the end of the world. They are about the end of memory. And memory, once silenced, must always find a new voice. For centuries, prophecy belonged to the past, until the world began to resemble its warnings. Floods came where there should have been drought. Fire rose from oceans and ice melted beneath ancient skies. Scientists called it pattern and data, but old texts had already written these moments. Across archives and satellites, researchers noticed the same unsettling truth. The prophecies once thought symbolic were describing our time with frightening accuracy. The future had stopped waiting. It had arrived. In universities, historians and data analysts worked together for the first time, mapping prophecy against historical events. What began as curiosity turned to unease. The predictions did not end in the past. They extended into tomorrow. One line, found in 3 different civilizations, described a great silence that follows the storm. The phrase matched the global blackouts and communication failures that followed massive solar flares. The world was beginning to sound eerily like its own myth. Religious leaders once dismissed these patterns as coincidence, until the coincidences became impossible to ignore. An ancient Hebrew verse predicted fire raining from the heavens, days before meteor fragments ignited over modern deserts. A Sumerian line spoke of metal birds falling from the clouds long before the tragedies of the 20th century. Each rediscovery blurred the line between faith and fact. between divine vision and the mathematics of inevitability. Modern prophets no longer wear robes or speak from mountains. They appear in the quiet hum of laboratories, in equations and algorithms that predict what tomorrow holds. Yet the more precisely we calculate the future, the more it begins to resemble the stories once dismissed as myth. Perhaps prophecy never ended. It simply changed its language, replacing ink with code and faith with data. As the final translations emerge, a new realization dawns. The ancient prophecies were not about predicting events. They were warnings about what happens when humankind stops listening. From temples to satellites, the message has always been the same. Knowledge without wisdom becomes its own curse. The voice that once spoke from dust now echoes in circuits and storms, whispering the same plea it always has. Remember, every prophecy once scattered across centuries now converges into one truth. From Babylonian tablets to digital code, the same pattern emerges: humanity is the fulfillment of its own visions. The ancients never foresaw gods descending from the skies. They foresaw us, the builders of machines that think, the dreamers who shape storms and silence oceans. The circle is closing, and with it comes an understanding that chills the soul. Prophecy was never about destiny. It was about recognition. We are living the story they warned of. The lines that once spoke of God's wrath now read like human invention. Fire without flame. Voices across the wind. The mirror that remembers all. The ancients described technologies they could not name. Their visions. Glimpses of what would one day become ordinary. Each generation believed the end was near, not knowing they were building toward it. The prophecies were not predictions of destruction. They were blueprints of creation, written by those who had seen what we would become. As new translations emerge, one final pattern is revealed. A message repeating in every language, every culture, every era. When the makers forget they are made, the world will begin again. Scholars debate its meaning, but some believe it speaks of renewal, not doom. That humanity's greatest fall will be forgetting the humility that once made it human, and that the world will only heal when remembrance returns. In every corner of the earth, remnants of ancient prophecy begin to resurface. Fragments unearthed after floods, scrolls washed ashore, and digital archives recovering forgotten texts. Together they form not a warning, but a plea that humankind remember its place within creation, not above it. For prophecy was never punishment. It was guidance, left behind by those who understood that every civilization lives only as long as it listens to the lessons of its past. The forgotten prophecies have come full circle. What was once myth has become mirror. The ancients spoke to the future, not to frighten it, but to awaken it, to remind us that every age is both beginning and ending, every empire both builder and destroyer. In their words lies a single eternal truth. History does not repeat itself because it must, but because we forget. And when we finally remember, the voice from the dust will fall silent, not in warning, but in peace.